Hi, it's Alistair McIntyre here of Electric Scotland. I was just watching a little introduction I did back in 2010, so it's 7 years ago now. I was quite pleased with the wee introduction I gave at the time. I was trying to give you the background to the site and everything. But I thought, well, that's 7 years ago now, and this being 2017, it's now actually the 20th year of the site being up and about and available. So I thought it might be interesting to do just another little update to tell you what's happened since then. Essentially, of course, I've now left Scotland and I've been residing in Canada since 2004. So I've been here quite a while now, well settled in. I'm now retired. I'm now 66 years of age, so I'm in nice receipt of a few pensions, which are keeping the wolf from the door, you might say. So I no longer really need that much in the way of advertising income from the site, thank goodness. So I'm not really chasing advertising anymore. It was quite tight though, because certainly the advertising revenue was declining quite rapidly. I think most of my income used to come from Google, but that was just falling away almost every month. It would be decline, decline, decline. In fact, I think my income stream from Google fell by 80% over the last few years. So it was no longer quite possible to make a full-time living from the site, but luckily I had enough money put by to just about get me through to my pensions. And of course my pension income of course made all the difference. So now I'm fine money-wise now. Not making a fortune or anything like that, but I don't need much in actual fact. I've got everything I want, and I'm not someone that's wanted bigger and better things or anything. But what I've found is that because my focus was entirely on history and culture of Scotland, both at home and abroad, I find over the last 7 years that I have moved much more to recent events in Scotland. Like, you know, we had the big, almost 2-year battle for the independence referendum in 2014. So that started back in 2012, really. I had become a member of the Scottish, it's the SDA, Scottish Development Association. No, that's not it. Anyway, it's the SDA, and they had a think tank, and they were putting out papers on how they thought an independent Scotland should work. And they had views on virtually everything. And I got sent one paper, which was called Scotland in Europe. And I have to say, up to that time, I'd been perfectly happy to be in the EU. I mean, I thought it was a good thing for us. I hadn't really given a lot of thought. It just sounds like a good idea, because after all, Scotland's got tons of contacts throughout Europe over many years in history. So it sounded quite sensible. But in that paper that I read, I for the first time realised that because of EU mismanagement, the fishing industry was devastated in Scotland. We lost over 100,000 jobs. 100,000 jobs. And it wrecked a lot of our rural communities at the same time. And I think as a result we also lost something like £2 billion annually in income terms to the country. I mean, that was a huge loss due to pure mismanagement. That coloured my view. And I have to say, having read that and other information in that paper, I went from being quietly happy with being in the EU to being totally anti being in the EU. And thus, I couldn't understand the SNP's almost desperate demand that we must be in the EU with an independent Scotland. I thought that was bad. So what I was trying to do with the independence thing was to look at all these positive things that can happen within independent Scotland, things that we could do to make things better. And so I got much more involved in writing comments on newspaper sites like the Scotsman newspaper and Courier and some other papers that allowed comments to news stories. And I decided to put my views over on things, trying to influence the way people thought. And to that end, if you look at my website now, especially the index page at ElectricScotland.com, if you scroll down a little down that page, you'll see that I've got a Scot news feed. And these are news stories taken from the main Scottish newspapers on a daily basis, but also some more international news stories as well that have an effect in Scotland. And so these are published daily now, so that's a new thing that I've done since 2010. But above that, I've got a link to Scotland's future. And under that is quite a big section now, because I was taking all the major areas, finance, agriculture, fisheries, taxation, banking, energy, all these kind of major areas, and posting up papers and stuff like that that were being discussed in the press and in academia, so that people could read views of others. And while I tend to be anti-SNP, I have to say, and while I do support an independent Scotland, I don't actually support it right now, because I don't think the SNP is capable of running an independent Scotland. Although I did suggest you voted yes for independence at the last referendum, but that was on the basis that I hope once we got it, we might be able to get rid of the SNP and get a better team of people in to run the country. That was my hope, because I almost voted no, because I just didn't trust the SNP, I have to say. So you have to come to my point of view that I am now anti-SNP, so everything I say has that bias to it. The other thing, of course, that I went through was this Brexit thing, because I'm now anti-EU, and therefore I voted to, or I haven't got a vote, but I was recommending people voted to leave the EU. And of course, while Britain did that, Scotland didn't. And frankly, the amount of nonsense that's talked about Brexit is just ridiculous. And of course, if you look at the most recent commentary that's coming out, Britain as a country has never been stronger. It's the strongest of all the G7 countries in the world. And they think it will, some of the big ones are saying it's likely that will continue for another 3 decades. So all the doom gloom sayers and everything like that got it all wrong, basically. And of course, all Scottish political parties voted that we should remain in the EU. So there was no actual dissenting voices in Scotland, yet over 1 million voted to leave, regardless of all the political parties telling people to vote the other way. So I often wonder what would have happened on that vote if people were allowed a free vote instead of being told to vote that way by their parties. Anyway, we'll just have to see what happens. But that's a focus that I have done, I spent much more time on. I've also started a new section, I call it the Scottish Innovation Party, or SIP for short. The reason I'm doing that is that I don't see that much evidence of new thinking in Scotland. And so I wanted to examine all the major areas of our economy and to try to appraise where we are today and where we could go tomorrow if we used new ways of doing things. And I'm willing to draw from all over the world for this. So, for example, I talk about health. Then there I'm talking about the Aman canteens in India, where for just a few rupees, people can get a really good meal in the Ammon canteens there, which are nutritious, and because one of the problems we have in Scotland is obesity is a major problem for us. It's also costing us an arm and a leg for the health service, you know, to handle all the obesity issues. So I'm trying to look at new ways of thinking, and in some cases old ways of thinking. For example, our education system is now pretty average. In fact, it's almost below average, whereas we used to be the envy of the world in education. So I've started to look at education from an historical point of view, when we were at the top of our game in those days, the top of the world. I mean, anyone wanted to be educated in Scotland because our reputation was so brilliant in education. Now we're nothing in comparison. So where do we go wrong? And I'm trying to examine that. So I'm hoping when you go to those sections within the SIP that you'll read things which make you think and think, well, that sounds like it would be doable if we did that in Scotland. How could we go about doing that? It's like in energy, nuclear power. The newest nuclear power stations give virtually no waste whatsoever, and it's the cheapest way we can give energy without having any green effect. So I think you could say that's where I spent a lot more of my time, is on these kind of issues, hoping that this body of work that I'm gradually building will help people when they're looking for solutions to today's problems. I'm also getting a bit, I suppose, I think I said before, I may be becoming an angry old man these days, because I'm no longer willing to accept things as I once did. It's like, for example, when I came to Canada, I joined the Knights Templars. They are NGOs of the United Nations. I mean, meant to be a wonderful organisation. But the longer I was with them, I found that I didn't know what they were doing internationally. Yes, they were at the United Nations in Geneva, Vienna, New York. They were on NATO Priory. But we didn't seem to hear anything about what we're actually achieving. They might put out an odd statement from someone or other and attach their name to it. But what were they actually doing? Did they change someone's mind by participating? What did they do? And I had no information on that. That at all. Sorry, I've got a cold at the moment, so a bit of a cough and sniffy nose. But anyway, so I put a video up on YouTube, basically castigating the order and saying it's about time they got better communications. And also our Grand Prior in Canada, I mean, I didn't really have the words to describe him, but frankly, I think he's useless. And I actually said that. And in the old days, I wouldn't have said something like that. But I think I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking I'm mortal, I could die any time now. Why am I holding back? Let's just put it out there and see what happens, see if I can make a difference. So I'm more willing to do that. That's why I'm more willing to put comments up on newspaper websites, commenting about things. So that's my change, I think, since 2010. I got much more involved in international affairs and in modern Scottish affairs than I ever would have got involved in before. So these are the big changes. The other thing that interests me is that because I'm an old-fashioned website, if you now search Google, for example, and they actually present you with a link to one of my pages, it'll say this is not a mobile-friendly site. I just state that in black, bold letters. And I feel really complimented by that. I mean, in the early days when Google was just first around and I was a well-established website at that time, I actually got hundreds, thousands of emails thanking me for pointing out this new Google site search engine that was available. So I was one of the sites at those early days that helped Google do really well. And now Google are turning around and punishing me for helping them all these years ago, because they don't want to bother with anything that's not mobile friendly. I can tell you, I'm very surprised that no one has actually competed with Google, because the way Google does it, you have to be a popular site to get a link. But I'm a researcher, and I'm not looking for popular sites, because popular sites don't tend to give you the detail that I'm after. And you can't find it with Google. And I think there needs to be a new site search engine in the world that focuses on content, quality of content, and not popularity. I mean, I'll give you for example, Google will follow you around the place. So it doesn't matter where you go, the adverts you get served up on a website are partly due to where you yourself have gone. Now I'm in Canada, and I was interested in a frozen food company here in Canada, and when I researched them, I found out that they had a subsidiary in the UK. So out of interest, I went to the UK to find out more about them. And of course, when you go to the UK site, they will only deliver in the UK, they won't deliver to Canada. But after I spent some time on their site, what happened? For the next month, no matter where I went, I was getting adverts from this English company that couldn't supply me even if I wanted it. Google have really gone stupid of late. I think it's just making far too much money. They're just not thinking. But I was sick fed up with that bloody advert. Everywhere I went, they followed me around. And I say, even if I wanted to, I couldn't have bought anything from them. And that happens continuously with Google. So I just wish there were changes somehow that we could make. Facebook, Twitter, yeah, huge. But I don't know. I mean, they don't suit me. I mean, I really don't know why people say that this person wants to be your friend. Well, isn't that nice? But who are you and why do you want to be my friend? But they don't tell you who they are. And if you do click the link, invariably you don't learn anything about them anyway. And they don't tell you why they want to be your friend. But I'm expected to accept them just with that, because someone wants to be my friend. Why should they be my friend? It's ridiculous. Stupid, in fact. But that's where we are. I think we're more stupid today than we've ever been. And then I'm getting involved, like in, you know, people couldn't believe that we voted for Brexit. They couldn't believe that Donald Trump actually got voted president. But from what I can see, Donald Trump's done exactly what he said he would do. So the people that voted for him are really chuffed. They think he's the best president they've ever had, because he's actually doing what he promised he would do, whereas all other presidents haven't. But anyway, as I say, I must confess, I watched that presidential with great amusement, because why is it that if an MP or a senator or whatever, congressman, change their mind on something, or maybe they got something wrong, they're told to resign? Where was the outcry for all these political journalists to resign? I call on all of them to resign. I mean, CNN is a disaster. I'd never trust CNN again in my life. Right up to the last minute, they were convinced that Donald Trump would not win and Clinton would win. And almost everything they said was against Trump the whole time. They're meant to be giving you advice, but clearly they're biased as hell, or they're just plain stupid. So CNN, I don't know, they should be dead. They're not worth anything in my view now. As are many of the other newspapers that are around the place that purport to give you news. And the big danger of that is that now we'll only go to blogs, and we're only going to read the blogs that we like. And that's also dangerous, because you have to get a different point of view now. You can't just accept one point of view. I mean, if I only accepted one point of view, I'd be seeing the SNP are doing a fantastic job in Scotland, whereas they're doing a hellish job in Scotland. But if you don't read the other papers, you'll never realise how bad they really are. But the same goes, as I say, for the States. I mean, this thing about the judges and this travel ban, The guy's talking about 3 months to get things sorted out so that they'll get a better check when people do come in. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And yet everyone's against them. These judges should be fired. What right do they have of blocking that vote from Donald Trump? I think it's just ridiculous. And then you've got the same in the UK. Supreme Court voting that we must get a vote in the House over Brexit. Well, we've just got it, son. So the judges, they can stay all the way they want, but we've got Brexit now. So you, as it were. I think these judges, the trouble is they're so divorced from reality, they don't need to make a living. They just need to sit there and pontificate from their great height. So as I say, I'm getting to be an angry old man. I really am. And I think that's the changes that you might partly see on the site as a result of my getting a bit more engaged and getting a bit more passionate about things than perhaps I used to. Because I think I'm at the point where I don't need advertising revenue anymore. Because I don't get any more advertising revenue, I'm quite perfectly happy. I don't need it. So I don't need to be kind of politically quiet in case I rock the boat anywhere like that. So I'm more willing to jump in and say what I think. And I still get well over I'm still getting well over 1 million visitors to the site. I don't know how many over the million, but I'm still getting over 1 million people visit the site all the time. So I still have a good base there, despite me being an old, mobile, unfriendly site. And I will say I have no plans to change it. Because 1, I can't afford to change it. 2, I don't have the time to change it. So whether I want to change it or not, it ain't going to happen. End of story. If someone out there wants to come up with the money or the staff to do that, I'll happily talk to them. I don't mind changing the site, but I don't have the money to change the site, and I certainly don't have the time to change the site. So it ain't going to change. And because I'm an historical site, that's got to be good for me, I would have thought. Because after all, the site itself is history. It was the first history site, Scottish history site on the web. Actually carried the first Scottish clan information on the site. Even though the idiot that was the chief at the time forced me to take it down afterwards. But of course they've since put it back up. But he was an idiot, but there's too many idiots around the world, unfortunately, these days. So that's where the main changes have come, is that I'm being a wee bit more aggressive on things. But as I say, at the same time, there's some great stuff going on. I mean, just this last week I found some dictionary, directory and yearbooks from Forfar. And I have to say I spent at least half a day reading just 1 volume. Because the wee stories and stuff like that they had in the yearbook were just fascinating. Great fun to read. And also there's lots of references to other books and material which I followed up on as I was reading. And I mean, I think I could have spent the full day, but I had other things to do, so I kind of cut it short. But I made that available in this week's weekly newsletter that I put up, so if you're reading the newsletter you'll get a link to that from the site. So there you go. I mean, it's so the last 7 years has been getting involved in independence and Brexit, even to some degree politics with Trump. Talking about the 2008, of course, we had the big financial disaster, but that's, I think, following that through, because I mean, one will say that during Obama's term in the States, he seemed to get them back onto a better employment and monetary footing, but the States still got a huge debt. And that's why I think a lot of people are quite interested in Donald Trump, because he's promised to do something about that enormous debt. And his first few weeks in office, he seems to be doing exactly what he said he would do, which is brilliant. And of course his mother's Scottish, gotta be good. No, I like Donald Trump, always have liked him. He's a bit of an honest. He's not a politician. But I can see lots of problems ahead for him. Because after all, there's never been a billionaire international businessman as president before. And his interests are widespread through his businesses, but through international countries. So there's almost nothing you can do that you can't be accused of plagiarism or whatever. So I think it's going to be fun to see how things go. But I think Americans need to look at him and say he's a businessman. He's not a politician, he's a businessman. Let's see what a businessman can do for America. And I think they want to give this guy a chance. But they don't seem to be willing to do that. Especially they didn't elect him. But Clinton shot herself in the foot as she did with the Obama thing. She was too complacent, thought she would just win. And so, frankly, a lot of the blame goes to her as well. And again, it's these kind of things I'm able to say now on the site. So, there you go. So that's what's happened since 2010. I've kind of got more involved and a bit more aggressive on political change and stuff like that, and following up. So, if you want to read the news stories and stuff like that, and look at more detailed papers behind all of that, they're all available on Electric Scotland for you to read. So, thanks for listening, and hopefully next time I talk to you, I've got over this cold. Thanks, bye-bye.